California, at least 13 people were arrested as hundreds blocked traffic on 2 major highways, waving Mexican flags and burning a giant effigy of Donald Trump. Police fired rubber bullets, and pepper spray at hundreds of protesters after the crowds took over major intersections.
Load up, load up, load up, we're rubber bullets.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake, falling, 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 falling.
Fraud, homophobia, sexual assault, white supremacy.
In terms of reaching out and being inclusive, he's done that too. And a will to risk to make things better, and opportunities to embrace the underserved communities.
White privilege!
Load up, we're rubber bullets.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake.
Here in New York, as many as 10,000 people surged through the streets and surrounded the barricaded-off Trump Tower where Donald Trump lives.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake.
We reject the president-elect! Load up, load up, load up, we're rubber bullets.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake.
I think it speaks to the disenfranchisement of the people that someone like him could be seen as offering anything to the masses.
Load up, load up, load up, we're rubber bullets.
Little snowflake falling from the sky.
What about gay people? Trump has vowed to protect the LGBT community from a fanatical ideology that represents its biggest threat, radical Islam.
As your president, I will do everything in my power to protect our LGBTQ citizens from the violence and oppression of a hateful foreign ideology.
Load up, load up, load up, we're rubber bullets.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake, falling, 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 falling.
He is a racist.
Under Obama, more black people are living below the poverty line. The number of African Americans on food stamps has increased 58% under Obama.
On every leading economic issue, on the major economic issues, black Americans have lost ground in every one of those leading categories. So for the last 10 years, it's not been good for black folks.
Is this how the left helps black communities? By making them poorer and more dependent on government. Race relations are at their worst in decades. 8 years of Obama has been devastating for the black community.
He is a sexist. He is a neo-Nazi.
Well, we don't understand why you called in the National Guard.
Falling on my nose.
Not my president. He is a lying ass.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake,
Fake ass.
little snowflake falling from the sky.
Dumb ass son of a bitch.
Load up, load up, load up, we're rubber bullets.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake falling, 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 falling.
That's not my president. That's not my president.
Load up, load up, load up, we're rubber bullets.
Falling in my hand.
Thank you for taking America back 60 years of progress.
Falling on my head.
You just voted in a Nazi fascist.
Falling on my nose. Falling in my hand. Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake.
What you gonna do about it? What you gonna do?
The following is a Nightside Radio Studios production. From the wind-powered Nightside Radio Studios,
tear down this wall.
This is the J.J. McCartney Show.
It's this man. It's the compassion. It's the dignity. It's the wisdom. It's the horse sense of the guy.
Did you know that 65% of the people murdered in the last 10 years were killed by handguns?
Would it make you feel any better, little girl, if they was pushed out of windows?
The American people have seen the truth, and they can see through your lies. There's coming a day when publications such as yours turn into nothing more than flea market advertising. They'll be handing it out for free in grocery store parking lots under everybody's windshield wiper. Yeah, that's the future for the Washington Post and the New York Times and every other liberal publication in this country. We are not going to tolerate your bull anymore. None of it. The American people are fed up. I thought we made that clear on November 8th, but apparently you people in the media just don't get it. A new chapter in American history begins now.
It is my high honor and distinct privilege to introduce to you the President-elect of the United States of America.
Donald Trump is the person to make America great again.
We are a team.
They said it couldn't be done.
Together, we will lead our party back to the White House.
He said it must be done.
Beginning on January 20th, we cannot afford to be so politically correct anymore. The most important difference between our plan and that of our opponent is that our plan will put America first.
Here's J.J. McCartney.
All right, thank you, Marcus, and hello, everybody. Welcome to the Thursday edition of the J.J. McCartney Show. We've got Michael Cutler on the line. And boy, have we got a lot to bring you today, my friends. Meanwhile, the deep freeze is on. We'll tell you all about it. Plus, your phone calls. Michael Cutler live in hour number 1 of the J.J. McCartney Show next. Well, welcome, everybody. Welcome. Glad to have you with us. You know what? The biggest trick for this day is staying warm. Michael Cutler, how are you doing?
I'm terrific. How are you doing, JJ? Always great joining you. I hope you had a wonderful holiday.
I did, and I got to tell you, we had the deep freeze earlier. Last weekend on Christmas Day, our low was 12 degrees below zero, and next Sunday, that's New Year's Eve. It's going to cool down that night. Going into New Year's will be minus 15 or lower. Coming up this weekend here. But I know you folks in New York are expecting the coldest New Year's Eve ever on Sunday.
Yes. And I got to tell you, I've never understood this desire to stand out there with a gazillion people.
Never made sense.
And be caged in because they don't want to have people moving around, the worries about terrorism and so forth. So once you're there, you're not going anywhere.
That's right.
I always
just
think
plain
about, my God,
crazy.
what are you thinking?
Yeah, it's like lemmings. You know that you know. Well, if you were to if you were to run off a cliff, or if the lemmings are running off the cliff, are you going to follow them? I don't know. You know, especially since New York, especially Times Square, such a magnet for troublemakers from let's say non-English speaking countries. Okay?
Yeah.
Dance around the political correctness.
Well, but, by the way, this isn't about political correctness. We really need to correct the language. I believe this stuff that's going on is Orwellian.
Yes,
and it's important
much
to make
better
the
term.
distinction.
Absolutely right.
I wrote an article for the Social Contract. I do lots of writing. Front Page gets most of my pieces. I may have an article up on Newsmax shortly. And I want to talk about some of my front page articles. But I wrote an 8-page article for the Social Contract, which is a quarterly journal. And the title of it was Language Wars, The Road to Tyranny is Paved with Language Censorship.
Yes.
So, political correctness means you don't use the words of hate. And I fully endorse and subscribe to that. The N word, any word that smells of it, wrong.
Right.
But what has happened in the name of political correctness is now we have censors who are the ultimate arbiters without anybody appointing them or knowing who in the world they are, saying, oh, if you engage in hate speech, we need to shut you down. That's dangerous. It's anti-American. It's against the First Amendment. And that's because of what Orwell had said. And Orwell was right. He equated language control with thought control.
Yes.
Human beings think in words.
That's right.
When you can eliminate words, you eliminate the thoughts they represent. Look at the immigration debate. There's a couple of key words I'd love to start with. Alien. Any person not a citizen or national of the United States. That's the legal definition. It's in the law.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Where's the insult? Where is this a word of hate? It isn't.
Yeah,
And by the way, if it's such a horrific word, dreamers, the A in dreamers, alien minors, alien.
Yes.
So suddenly the
Yes.
word alien is palatable when it supports a fake narrative. I'll give you another example. Undocumented. The alien entered undocumented. That word doesn't even exist. It comes right out of the Ministry of Truth from George Orwell. They're talking about aliens who weren't inspected. To say that an alien who runs the border entered undocumented is like saying that the guy that robs the bank made an undocumented withdrawal.
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right.
So,
and, you know, the thing is, the people, you know, not only do they think in words, but they also think in images. And, you know, let's be honest. When most of us were younger and we heard certain words, we saw certain pictures appear in our mind.
Right.
And for example, I mean, you use the word alien, and for most of us, I think, and I might be wrong, but I think it's safe to say most of us probably pictured something like the Star Trek aliens. Okay? You know, something, an abnormally large head or whatever else was in Gene Roddenberry's imagination that day.
Right.
And for many, many people, that's their first image when they hear a term like alien, especially young children, because they've been conditioned to think that way. And then suddenly though, along come the thought police, and they, as you said, they are trying to manipulate the language literally inside your own head.
Well, but that was done it started with Jimmy Carter, at least where the word alien was concerned.
Right.
And by the way, the open borders crowd, and let's call them what they are, they're not pro-immigrant. See, the media gives them a level of credibility they're not entitled to. One of the first rules of debate, my degree was in communications, arts, and sciences. Had I not become a federal agent, I had thought of either teaching debate on the college level or being a journalist, that sort of thing. Journalists and agents are very similar creatures, by the way. In both cases, whether you're an honest agent or an honest journalist, you're a fact finder. For a journalist, the ultimate goal is a story. For the agent, the ultimate goal is either an indictment, or for an immigration agent, either an indictment or an order of deportation against an alien. Because there's both administrative and criminal laws that you deal with as an immigration agent. But the idea is it's all fact-based. But what started to happen is the open borders crowd, not pro-immigrant crowd, the anarchist crowd, said, well, you're making people sound like aliens from other planets. And so I went back and said, then what does the term inalienable rights mean, and where does that come from? Long before we thought about Martians or Klingons, we thought about the idea of unalienable rights. So the idea of an alien, again, is a foreign national.
Yeah.
And foreign nationals, just like strangers on the street corner, do not have an inherent right to enter your property or for aliens to enter a country. That's what sovereignty is about.
And one of the things it's kind of a misnomer, because people have misinterpreted the word in the Constitution. It's not inalienable, as in the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence actually is inalienable. What that means is that nobody else can lay a claim to your rights. And it's a very, it's just like somebody could attach a lien to your house. The Constitution and the Declaration make it clear that your rights are yours. They don't belong to anybody else. Nobody else has the right to take your rights away. Unless you break the law.
Interesting interpretation. And to be honest, I've never heard that before, but that's really very interesting. So let's turn to an article that I did. Hopefully Newsmax will be posting this one. I'm waiting to hear from their editorial folks. There was an article that was truly remarkable, published in India in a website called Indian Quartz or India Quartz. I'm sorry, Quartz India. I'm doing this backwards. Quartz India. So here's the title. Under Trump, Indian H-1B wives fear becoming second-class citizens again.
What?
Yeah, you heard me.
Second-class citizens.
Right. So and we've also had members of Congress talk about illegal aliens as being fine citizens of the United States.
Wow.
So if you want to talk about twisting everything you could possibly imagine, here we go. So they publish an article, the title, Under Trump, Indian H-1B wives fear becoming second-class citizens again. Now, let's be clear. Aliens are non-citizens, and then within aliens, there's three categories. Aliens who are here as immigrants, which mean they have green cards, they're on the path to citizenship, but they're still not citizens. And if any alien claims to be a citizen, that alien, under Title 18, United States Code, Section 911, is committing a 3-year felony by making a false claim to U.S. citizenship. There's a specific law. Calls for 3 years in jail if it's prosecuted and you get the maximum punishment. So even a guy with a green card cannot properly say, I'm American. No, you're not. You're an alien who's been lawfully admitted for permanent residence. Then we have non-immigrants. Anybody on a tourist visa who comes with the visa waiver program, foreign students, foreign journalists, H-1B, H-4, which are the dependents of H-1B. These are all categories of non-immigrant aliens. And then you have aliens who are here illegally. They didn't enter undocumented. They entered without inspection, or after entering legally, violated the terms of their admission. If they were foreign students, they failed to attend school. If they came as tourists, they took jobs they weren't supposed to take, or they committed crimes for which they were convicted, no matter what their status, including people with green cards, that renders you deportable. So there's a very clear line. You're either a citizen or you're not. All others who are non-citizens come under the categories of aliens, if you want to do a flow chart, okay? You have aliens and you have citizens. Now we've got India complaining bitterly that their dependents, 90% of whom are women, so that also in the article makes Donald Trump anti-female, by the way. If you want to talk about contriving an argument.
Yes.
Now, what's interesting is the article quotes somebody who is an immigration lawyer. So obviously with Trump clamping down on H-1B visas, because remember, he didn't only say we're going to bring jobs to America, but we're going to make damn sure that American hands do the job. You haven't heard that since Eisenhower. Think about that.
And how refreshing.
And I'm a big Eisenhower fan.
You know, how refreshing it is to hear an American president make those distinctions.
So now tell me something. I'm a registered Democrat, lifelong. I don't know when the last time I voted for a Democrat because the wagon that they are riding in has no wheels. But explain to me how anybody who's ostensibly pro-labor could demonstrate animosity toward the first president in generations who not only promises to bring jobs to America, but to make damn sure that Americans get to do the jobs themselves.
Yes. Yeah.
In fact, he wants to curtail the H-1B visa program, which is a huge source of revenue for India. Do you know that last year, India got over $65 billion, with a B, $65 billion in remittances, money wired home, not just from America, but from all around the world. They send their workers out there, these little worker bees, and they tell them, go work in those countries and make sure you take care of your family back home. So now the article complains that Obama allowed the spouses of H-1Bs to work. Trump is now reviewing it, saying, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense because we didn't used to do it because these H-4 visa holders don't have special skills. So now what you're doing is providing competition for American workers. Now think about this. Obama, Democrat, right?
Yes.
Goes out there, we're going to help the American people, screams about what's going on in poverty and the minority communities. And what does he do? Helps to make certain that the people living in poverty sink further into poverty. and destroy the middle class all at the same time by flooding America with record numbers of authorized foreign workers. Just what Americans need, more competition. Did you ever play musical chairs when you were a kid?
Sadly, yes. And, it's a terrible feeling you get when you realize that you're the odd man out.
Right. So now imagine this. Musical chairs, there's always one chair fewer than the number of kids who circle the chairs.
That's right.
And when the music stops, if you've never played the game, your job is to dive into a chair, and ultimately that leaves one kid standing who leaves the room, and then the music starts up again, and everyone circles the remaining chairs, and so it goes until only one person remains.
And let's refine that analogy to say this. Imagine that you've been in the room and you're playing musical chairs, and you know there are enough chairs for all but one of you. Then all of a sudden, whoever's running the game brings in another chair without telling you, and then lets somebody else come in and sit down in that chair before you even have a chance to.
No. Let me give you a better analogy, and I wrote about this years ago, and I'm going to have to revive it. Imagine one kid leaves the room, and suddenly they throw the doors open and flood the room with more kids, but they don't bring in any more chairs.
Yeah.
Now, how's that for an image?
Yeah. Well, or...
Now what happened to your odds of catching a seat when the music stops?
Exactly right. And this
is what Mr. Obama did.
Yeah.
This is what George W. Bush did. I hate to tell you, Ronald Reagan was no big help either. We've had one president after another president, Obama being the flat-out, absolute, positive worst. But this has been going on for decades, and you finally have a president that says, wait a minute. Why are there kids playing musical chairs who shouldn't be in the room in the first place?
Yeah. Well, and the honest truth is this. The liberal machinery that has been stoked to allow unlimited numbers of illegals to cross the border and then find work.
And legals.
Exactly. But the problem is, if you try to go back in modern American history to a time when this wasn't a problem, you're going to predate everybody that's living today. And John Steinbeck wrote The Grapes of Wrath.
The Grapes of Wrath.
It tried to evoke a certain emotional response by the reader regarding the abuses that were put upon foreign people that came to America and worked on these ridiculously large farms and plantations and vineyards and what have you.
Yep.
And what these people fail to understand, and John Steinbeck failed to understand, is that when you try to make it easy for foreigners to come to America illegally or legally and be put to work, you are actually enslaving those people.
Well, it's worse than that. And let me tell you how it's worse than that. What we are really doing is propping up oligarchies around the world of corrupt governments and corrupt corporations.
Exactly right.
So Mexico now has at least 10% of their citizens living in the United States. The Mexican economy depends on the remittances. Mexico gets well over 20, perhaps 25 billion a year in visible money. Now, understand there's also invisible money.
Right.
Visible are the remittances. Invisible, the guy, and if you go into the neighborhoods that have lots of illegal aliens, there's tons of dental services. Now, some cases the people work there who are here illegally, so forth. But it's also about transferring money into gold.
Yep.
Gold is much easier to move covertly. If you're going to move $1 million in hard cash, especially since we no longer produce bills larger than $100, that takes up a lot of space. But if you can convert money into gold, or we saw it with Iran when Iranians fled after the Shah fell, some Iranians converted millions into drugs. And the drugs were brought into America, converted back to cash. So it was a covert way of moving tons of money. So when you're able to do that, even more money flows into Mexico. So the Mexican economy, number one, depends on their people coming here and working and sending money home. Now, everyone knows that the whole notion of hiring illegal aliens is to exploit them.
Yeah, exactly right. It's really a form of human trafficking if you really get down to it.
No, not a form of it. It constitutes human trafficking, and Look at what it does. So
Right.
now you're dealing with people funding the Mexican economy. We don't have to feed them in Mexico. That's their thought. We don't need to pay for their medical treatment. If they get sick, they get injured, let the Americans pay. And we keep on paying. And suddenly you have Donald Trump coming in as a hard-headed businessman. And he said to the UN, you can take your, you know what, and take it with you. And I loved what he did with Israel. And some of my liberal friends, and I've always considered myself a centrist leaning towards liberalism on 90% of the issues. But these people have lost their minds. And I've had people say to me, well, this is going to destroy the peace talks. And I look them in the eye and I say, what peace talks?
Yeah, you mean the pie in the sky that's never going to happen?
You mean the bombings and the shellings and the rocket attacks and the suicide bombers?
Exactly right.
Is that what you consider peace?
Yeah,
this isn't where everyone has been operating in good faith and everyone has been fair and decent about it. This is about people going to Israel, and the Israelis bend over backwards. They become contortionists, and they think they finally have a deal, and they sit down and they said, well, you know what? We have another demand.
Oh, brother. Well, I tell you what, Michael, we need to take a very quick time out.
Sure, let's do that.
Our guest is Michael Cutler. He is frequently published in many places. We'll give you a complete rundown on where you can read his material. And, my friends, he is a 30-year special agent for the INS, retired now, but very good to have him with us on this Thursday, the 28th day of December. And we'll have much more with Michael Cutler coming up in just a minute.
The J.J. McCartney Show.
Hey, everybody. J.J. McCartney here. You know, it's not very often that I get excited about a product, but I am sure excited about this one. I'm talking, of course, about MyPillow.com. These pillows are made in the USA. They come with a 60-day comfort guarantee and a 10-year warranty. They are machine washable and dryable. They come with a patented interlocking fill. It keeps you cool at night, and it will not go flat. Go to MyPillow.com. Click the Radio Listeners Special tab and use promo code JJMC to get 2 premium king or queen size pillows and 2 additional go anywhere travel pillows for one special price and free shipping. That's MyPillow.com, promo code JJMC, or call 800-953-6613. That's 800-953-6613. MyPillow.com, promo code JJMC.
And now, here's Psychobabble.
Now, Janice, please, don't cry. Don't cry. Look, I know we're breaking up, but it's not you. It's me.
You've been listening to Psychobabble from Nightside Radio Studios.
Today, my new dad and I shot off a rocket in the park.
Today, my new son and I failed to shoot off a rocket.
The rocket launched into the air.
And then crashed into the pond.
I'll never forget that day.
I'll never forget that day, even if I tried.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are. For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
The J.J. McCartney Show, jjmccartney.com.
Look up, look down, look around, look up, look down, look around. In the trees and on the ground, 'cause the ALB must be found.
If you're hearing this, you should be concerned about the Asian longhorn beetle, an invasive species that's destroying our trees. But you can help. Look for the signs and help stop the beetle.
Look up, look down, look around, look up, look down, look around. In the trees and on the ground, 'cause the ALB must be found.
Some signs of the ALB are dime-sized holes on tree trunks, a sawdust-like material called frass, and the beetle itself, with a long black body and white spots.
Look up, look down, look around, look up, look down, look around. In the trees and on the ground, 'cause the ALB must be found.
Learn all the signs and how to report them at AsianLonghornedBeetle.com. That's AsianLonghornedBeetle.com.
We are back with Michael Cutler, our guest today, on this 28th day of December. By golly, we have 3 days left in the year. And Michael Cutler, 2017 has, in spite of the best efforts of those crazies in the media and many people from the establishment of both parties. Donald Trump has led America to what can only be described as a booming economy, and it promises to get much better in 2018.
It does, and this comes back again to the idea that he wants to put Americans back to work. You know, people criticized Ronald Reagan for what was called trickle-down economics. If you look at the tax bill, some of it might sound reminiscent of the Reagan program, but there's a very big difference. Ronald Reagan made no effort to make certain that American workers got the jobs.
Right.
Donald Trump is adamant about that. And that's a major, major distinction. But look what the other side has done. And by the other side, I include Republicans, because they're in this together.
Yep.
Most of the debates, most of the fights between Republicans and Democrats are no different from what we watched as kids when we watched tag team wrestling.
Sure.
They claim to be adversaries, but in reality, they go out and have dinner after the match.
They're drinking buddies after the show. No
Absolutely.
Doubt.
Yep. And they spray ketchup on each other. You think they're bleeding. Oh, my God, he ran his head into the turnbuckle. No, he didn't. They make it look good. But here's the deal. Let me give you an example. We keep hearing about chain migration, big problem, and the Dreamers, DACA. And again, we have to remember A in Dreamer is alien for all the nonsense.
Right.
But we're told that these people need to be reunited with their families. They come to America. Now we've split up families. So let's put some logic into this conversation and some honesty for a change. I have a son who moved from New York to Virginia. He's an engineer. I'm very proud of him, very successful, has a major post at a major company. So he moved to Virginia. When I want to go visit him, I got to get in my car and go visit with him. I didn't move to Virginia. I didn't move into his house. I didn't move into the development where he's living with his wife and our grandchildren. We visit. Similarly, other people have kids who move all over the place, chasing jobs, chasing opportunities, chasing education. We don't move with them. We go visit them, but we don't move with them. When a person enters America as a resident alien, they are entitled generally to bring their spouses and their minor children. That makes perfect sense. We don't expect people to split themselves off from their children and their spouses. But the idea is that they can also bring their parents, which I'm actually okay with, and so is the president. If you read his statements, generally the parents are older, perhaps retired, maybe having health problems, maybe they're helping with the children if both parents are working. That's fine. But then they can bring with them every single one of their brothers and sisters and half-brothers and half-sisters.
Right.
And all of their spouses and all of their minor children. So you can have one new citizen, when they become citizens, they have that right, who can suddenly bring in 40 or 50 siblings, spouses, and nieces and nephews.
And why? Because their objective is
to
so
flood
much
America
different.
with cheap labor, new voters. But here's my point.
Exactly.
But there's a humane, logical solution that nobody talks about. You know, I began my 30-year career as an immigration inspector assigned to Kennedy Airport. I did that job for 4 years. For one of the 4 years, I was assigned as an adjudications officer during the marriage interviews. And for 26 years, I proudly carried the badge of special agent. I rotated through every single squad within the investigations branch. I was assigned to DEA intelligence for 4 years, first INS agent to pull that assignment. And then I was promoted to senior special agent assigned to the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. So I really took the scenic tour. But when I was an inspector at the beginning of my career, the holiday seasons were particularly busy. And you know why? Because people from all over the world came to visit family members who had moved to America. Why are you coming? To spend Christmas, to spend Hanukkah, to spend Easter, to spend Passover, whatever, with my brother, with my sister, with my whoever. Why in the world is anyone saying it's only fair to let them get green cards if their sibling came, and maybe they haven't even seen their sibling in 30 years, and that certainly happens in families. Right. What they should be saying is, okay, you want to visit your brother? Come to America on a tourist visa, spend the holidays, enjoy yourself, sightsee, have dinner, go to the weddings, go to the what, and then go home.
Right.
And then go home. You see, these are fake arguments and fake solutions. I'll give you another example of a fake solution. There are too many illegal, I can't say that, undocumented people in America. The only thing we can do, because there's just so many, is legalize everybody. But from now on, we're going to get tough. Yeah, that was the lie sold to us by the Reagan administration. By the way, back then they predicted 1 million aliens would be involved. We wind up with almost 4 million. What nobody will tell you, and I don't even know what the number is, how many more were ultimately granted green cards because of the 4 million, many of whom became naturalized citizens. So God only knows what that number looks like. And by the way, Reagan also didn't hire more agents, even though they made it a crime for knowingly hiring illegal aliens. So we agree with that change in law, but without agents to do the job can't and won't be done. And that's by design.
Right.
The immigration system is not broken, boys and girls. If you believe that, boy, oh boy, do I have a fence or a bridge or something to sell you. The immigration system is the most effective program in the entire federal government, doing exactly what the power elite wanted to do.
Right.
Flood America with cheap, exploitable, compliant labor so they can drive down wages of American workers, destroy the middle class to make more people more dependent on government, flood America with foreign students. We worry about North Korea. And now it turns out China was covertly providing petroleum to North Korea, although they're promising, we're working with you. And then they stab us in the back. Well, guess where the technology for North Korea's missiles and nuclear program came from? China.
Yeah.
So guess what? Today, right now, 150,000 Chinese foreign students are studying the STEM curriculum in the United States, science, technology, engineering, and math. And what do they do with their training? Well, first of all, they are entitled to get practical training in the United States. They can work for an American company, so they can put all that education to good use. And where do they generally go? Companies that get military contracts.
Right.
And what does that lead to? Espionage. Now, China has a program known as the principle of 1,000 grains of sand. Now, here's what it means. If you, for example, were to go to China, if we reverse the process, and I'm sure China would never, ever allow it because they're not as stupid as we are, and I would say to you, okay, JJ, I know you're working at the Chinese aircraft manufacturing company. Don't get me the blueprints for the latest fighter. That's dangerous. It's a problem. Just get me the assembly for the nose gear.
Right.
And then I go to everybody who gets a job working for one of those contractors, and I tell them, get me the control surfaces. Get me the diagram for the cockpit.
Yep.
Get me the diagram for the engine's compressor blade. And everyone comes home with a little piece of that jigsaw puzzle, and then they spread it out on the floor, they put the puzzle together, and guess what they now have? The blueprints for America's premier fighters. I subscribe to military websites. If you look at the latest stealth bomber produced in China, it looks like it could have come out of the Lockheed Skunk Works. You think
sure.
it's coincidence.
Yeah, with the advent of high tech and the ability to electronically scan objects, and then with the technology of 3D printing, people can build molds to build these components.
Or they just get the actual blueprint, or they're getting the blueprint by working for the manufacturer, and they are also learning how the computer networks operate so they can hack. They hack us thousands of times a day. Now, again, where are they getting the initial training? In our schools. So we are educating our adversaries. You know, the communists used to say the capitalists will sell you the rope with which you will hang them.
Yes.
For decades, folks, we have been having a fire sale on rope in Washington.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's coming home to haunt us. And here's part of the problem. For a politician, long-range planning is the next election. For a CEO, long-range planning is generally the next earnings report.
Exactly right.
The Chinese and the Russians and the Iranians, long-term planning is decades and generations down the road.
That's right.
You know, when you're driving your car, you certainly want to make sure the guy in front of you doesn't break down, stop short for some reason so you smash into him. But a good driver is also scanning way down the road.
That's
so if you see people driving off the cliff, you don't follow him off the cliff like a lemming.
Yeah,
we're not doing that in America. If all you're concerned about is how much money can I make in the next 90 days, then it makes perfect sense to move your factory to China.
Well,
you don't have to worry about the EPA.
You know, people don't understand the economics of this and how, China and I'm sure many other nations too, they get their hands on technology that cost American military and American industry billions of dollars to develop. Yep. And what the cash windfall that is created by this type of espionage is really literally incalculable.
But here's my point. But here's my point. No rational country would do what we're doing.
Right.
We claim to have a program of nuclear nonproliferation. Although I always worried because both George W. and Carter called it nuclear. And Carter was a nuclear engineer. When he came to Washington, I said, my God, the Beverly Hillbillies have come to Washington. But
well, you weren't too far off the mark.
No, I don't think I was. Who could forget Billy Beer and Lillian Carter? But here's my point. So if you're so concerned about nuclear nonproliferation, why in the world did the Carter administration allow GE to sell components for nuclear generators to the Iranian government? Agreed, the Shah was there, but we know that governments are fragile, especially in the Middle East.
That's right.
Revolutions are not unusual. Why would you take nuclear technology and put it into a country like Iran? And so where does that lead us to? To the predicament we're in now. And so you finally have a president who says, no more of this crap. No more of this crap. You come after me, I will nuke you. And what I love, and I've said this right along, one of the things you want in a president, I've always said this, is a gunslinger. Now, what do I mean by a gunslinger? You want our enemies to look at the president and say, gee whiz, there's no telling what that guy might do. When I was trained as an agent, when you execute a search warrant and you go into a drug location and there are heavy weapons, and believe me, when I tell you heavy weapons, you'll laugh. I was assigned to ATF, DEA, and the FBI. I had 3 separate walkie-talkies, and then I also had 3 separate radio call signs and 3 security badges to get me into each office. So we were always in short supply, great demand. And I was doing a lot of work with ATF, and finally the FBI gets a hold of me one day, and they said, Mike, we're shorthanded on a field op. We're doing search warrants. I need you to come with us. So I called up my buddy, Billy, over at ATF. I said, Billy, I'm sorry. I've got to go out with the Bureau because they wanted me to go with them on the search warrant.
Right.
And he said to me, you'll be sorry. I said, oh, yeah? What are you going to do about it? He said, not what I'm going to do about it, but we're going to have more fun. He said, I'll make you a bet. I'm going to bet you dinner. We come up with better stuff than you do. I said, I'll take your bet. So that night, we did the raid, and we pulled machine guns out of this guy's house and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. This is a violent business. And my beeper goes off in those days. We didn't have cell phones on our belts. My beeper goes off. It's the boss over at ATF. I run to the car because I did have a cell phone on my government vehicle, and I get Billy on the phone. He said to me, I like steak. I said, what are you talking about? We just got machine guns. He said, yeah, I beat you. I said, how can you beat machine guns? He said, the bomb squad just left. We had 2 live hand grenades in our apartment that we hit.
Wow.
And so this is the level of violence we're up against. Now, what happened in the mainstream media around that time, or more recently? You had the militarization of police, and everyone was screaming about how, well, guess what? You don't want to have people properly equipped when you're dealing with that level threat, but you have talk show hosts, including in the conservative media making ridiculous statements without knowledge. But let me tell you what they taught us. When you're going into a location where you're expecting heavy weaponry, this is not a tea party. You don't knock softly on the door and say, may I please come in? You have a warrant that entitles you to take the door down, and when you get in there, you act swiftly, and you come with overwhelming power of firepower and supremacy of numbers.
Shock and awe.
You betcha.
You bet.
And it's called a dynamic entry, and the idea is that the bad guy takes a look around and understands that he can be vaporized if he hiccups.
Sure.
And that's how you avoid the shooting in the first place. And I said, our leaders need to deal with our adversaries the way we were trained to deal with our adversaries in the street. There's got to be a level of uncertainty when this guy says, blink and I'll blow your brains out, that he just might pull the trigger.
Right.
And you finally have a president who does exactly that. I don't want them to look at a wuss and say, that guy would get scared if I yelled at him. I'm not worried about him. No, that guy just might shoot me. I better do what I'm told. And that's what you now have in the White House. The problem is, for decades, we've turned into a nation of wusses. You know, I was a scrawny kid, JJ, and I used to get beat up regularly because I don't think much of sports or athletes. I'll be honest with you. My heroes weren't athletes. My favorite oxymoron is heroic play. I don't know how you can be a hero when you're playing. My heroes were astronauts and test pilots. I got letters from Shepard and Grissom. I wouldn't trade those letters for any sports memorabilia in the world. I had the privilege of meeting Jim Lovell, Dave Scott, Jim McDivitt. I got a photograph with Gene Kranz. These are real heroes. But when you're a kid, if you don't agree with everyone, this is this whole thing about peer pressure, you're going to have a tough time. And because I was as skinny as a rail, I used to get beat up. And my father said to me, you're going to go to a gym, you're going to work out, you're going to learn how to defend yourself, you're going to learn how to box. We didn't do martial arts back then, it was boxing. And he said, either you stand on your own 2 feet or you're not going to be able to deal with life itself. There's a lot of mean-spirited people out there, and if you can't deal with schoolyard bullies, how the hell will you deal with being an adult?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I did exactly what my dad told me. I spent an entire summer pumping iron, and I developed an appetite you couldn't believe. I was cheaper to clothe than feed, as my mother said at that point.
Yep.
I put on something like 25 pounds in 6 months. It was all muscle, and I learned how to take a punch, but more importantly, I know how to give a punch. And all it took was 2 or 3 really good fist fights, and no one would even look at me sideways because they knew it wasn't going to end well for them.
Yep.
And today, what do we tell kids? Oh, if they bully you, run for help. So there was a story in the media how a kid with ADD was being bullied on his phone, obscenities texted to him, pushed around, punched, kicked, pushed on, spit on. Kid finally said, I've had enough, and he punched back, and he got suspended.
Yeah, yep.
Now, what are we teaching our kids? And this is why Americans look at Donald Trump, who came out of the same milieu as my father. My dad was a construction worker. He was a tradesman. And by the way, I don't think tradesmen are less skilled than professors. I would argue they're far more skilled and far more capable of dealing with the real world. And you know, so my dad had a very similar orientation as Donald Trump, or vice versa, except my pop was a worker, Trump was a boss, but the same mindset. If there's a problem, solve it. That's what my dad would always say to me. What are you coming to me for? Why couldn't you solve the problem?
You know,
and he taught me how to deal with issues, but when he did show up, he was the cavalry all by himself. How many parents are like that today, JJ?
You know, and it's not just parents. It is the establishment in general today.
Yes.
The message they're sending. I want to share with you some excerpts from an opinion piece in the New York Times today that was written by Mark Landler. And I want to get your, we can take extra time if we need to, but I want to get your reaction to this outrageous piece.
Go ahead.
The headline reads, Trump, the insurgent, breaks with 70 years of American foreign policy. You're
obviously talking about Israel.
Yeah, President Trump, they say, was already revved up when he emerged from his limousine to visit NATO's new headquarters in Brussels last May. He had just met France's recently elected President Emmanuel Macron, whom he greeted with a white-knuckle handshake and a complaint that Europeans do not pay their fair share of the alliance's costs, which is absolutely true. On the long walk through the NATO building's cathedral-like atrium, the president's anger grew. He looked at the polished floors and shimmering glass walls with a property developer's eye. It's all gloss, he later said. One bomb could take it out. By the time he reached an outdoor plaza where he was to speak with other NATO leaders, Mr. Trump was fuming, according to 2 aides who were with him that day. He was there to dedicate the building, but instead he took a shot at it, saying, I never asked once what the new NATO headquarters cost. Mr. Trump told the leaders, his voice thick with sarcasm, I refuse to do that, but it is beautiful. His visceral reaction to the $1.2 billion building, more than anything else, colored his first encounter with the alliance. Nearly a year into his presidency now, Mr. Trump remains an erratic, idiosyncratic leader on the global stage, an insurgent who attacks allies the United States has nurtured since World War II, and who can seem more at home with Americans' adversaries. His Twitter posts, delivered without warning or consultation, often make a mockery of his administration's policies and subvert the messages his emissaries are trying to deliver abroad. I'm pretty sure they're talking about Rex Tillerson. Now, Mr. Trump, they say, has pulled out of trade and climate change agreements and denounced the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran. He has broken with decades of American policy in the Middle East by recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And he has taunted Kim Jong-un of North Korea as short and fat, fanning fears of war on the peninsula. They say he has audaciously, assiduously cultivated President Xi Jinping of China and avoided criticizing President Vladimir Putin of Russia, leaders of the two countries that his own national security strategy calls the greatest geopolitical threats to America. Above all, they say Mr. Trump has transformed the world's view of the United States from a reliable anchor of the liberal rules-based international order into something more inward-looking and unpredictable. That is a seminal change from the role the country has played for 70 years. Now, Michael, these people are so deluded. They actually think that the policies of Barack Obama and George Bush and Bill Clinton have somehow made America a safer place and more popular around the world. And they fail to deal with the facts on the ground. I mean, it's a concoction. It's a concoction designed to do one thing and one thing only, and that is to attack the sitting president, who, by the way, has done things that nobody expected would be done in just 11 months.
Well, so here's, first of all, for your listeners, please go to frontpagemag.com. You can go to authors and click on my website. You can see all my articles. I have one up. There'll be one up tonight, by the way, I understand. But I wrote an article, and this was back on May 20th, 2016, about John Kerry. John Kerry, enthusiastic proponent of a borderless world, and the subtitle, How the Secretary of State's Globalist Agenda Renders Him Unfit for His Job. And what happened was John Kerry was delivering an address, a commencement address at Northeastern University. So here was his excerpt. I think that everything that we've lived and learned tells us that we will never come out on top if we accept advice from soundbite salesmen and carnival barkers who pretend the most powerful country on earth can remain great by looking inward and hiding behind walls at a time the technology has made that impossible to do and unwise to even attempt. Kerry said the future demands from us something more than a nostalgia for some rose-tinted version of a past that did not really exist in any case. But then he goes on and says this. Now, graduating class, I got to tell you, you really do look spectacular. I want you to. I mean, just look around you. Classmates of every race, religion, gender, shape, size, 85 countries represented, and dozens of languages spoken. You're the most diverse class in Northeastern history. In other words, you are Donald Trump's worst nightmare. Now, why is he excited and getting his panties twisted over the fact that 85 countries have students graduating from a university who will then go back to their countries and compete with America, perhaps even enable military forces of other countries to gain a leg up in technology? And the point that I made in my article was that that statement would be more befitting the Secretary General of the United Nations than the Secretary of State of the United States.
Yes.
Am I wrong?
No, not at all. Not at all.
And so to knock America and say, forget about borders. Let me tell you something. with very few exceptions. Think about this, folks. And I hope we can go a little bit long if we can, because I wanted to cover a little bit more today. If
Absolutely. We'll go into the second hour. No problem, Michael.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for your forbearance. So here's the point. Almost every border on this planet, international border, is not drawn with crayon or invisible ink, but blood.
Yes, absolutely right.
Most borders were the result of wars that were fought, lives that were lost, suffering that was endured, and then ultimately, as a compromise, lines got drawn, not lines in the sand. Most borders were drawn in blood, and you have John Kerry, nitwit, standing there, lurch as I call him. I have nothing but hatred and animosity for him and what he stands for. And again, I'm not a conservative, but he is delusional. He had more footage of himself tramping through the jungles of Southeast Asia than they shot of John Wayne when he made the movie Green Beret.
Yeah.
Again, tell me I'm wrong.
I can't.
This guy is a self-promoting fool. He is a clown who needs a rubber nose and floppy feet. And he stood there and made those statements, but that marches lockstep with the mindset of Obama, marched with Hillary Clinton. For all the concerns about Russia, that was the reason why the idea of putting that non-secured server in our house was an outrage, because it could be hacked and was hacked. You know, as an immigration agent, I had a top secret clearance, and we took that very seriously. It takes years of investigation, and every 5 years, I called it the bureaucratic equivalent of going for a colonoscopy. You'd be pulled into a room, interviewed for hours, and then investigators would go out, knock on doors, review bank records to make certain you didn't pose an obvious risk to national security. The safe in my office was only certified to handle secret material. Okay? I wasn't allowed to put top secret material in it because it didn't meet the standard. If I wanted to review top secret documents, I went over to the FBI and DEA because they had the facilities. And you don't read that material kind of like, Jay, I got nothing to do today. Let's see if I can dig through some reports that are interesting. Everything is predicated on need to know. Now, that secret safe that did not hold anything that could have led to the destruction of America had to be locked every night. If it wasn't locked, you had to sign for it. If I worked late, which was almost every night, whoever the security officer was, and we rotated, some nights I would be the security officer, otherwise it would be others of my colleagues in the office over at the Drug Task Force, you would sign for the safe, which meant you were responsible for locking it. So let's say, and this almost happened to me one day, 3 in the morning, I finished writing some reports, and I left my office bleary-eyed, thinking, my God, I can't get into my car fast enough. I want to put my head on the pillow. I've got to be back here at 10 o'clock in the morning. And I got out of the elevator. Halfway out of the building, I realized, oh, my God, I didn't lock the safe. I ran back to my locked office to lock my safe. And now understand, my locked office is in a federal building with 24-hour armed guards patrolling the hallways, like you've seen in the movies. And yet, if I had failed to lock my safe, and if my boss came in and saw my safe was open and that I had signed for it, I was looking at a minimum of a suspension. So now you have Hillary taking the equivalent, not of my safe, but a safe with the most valuable, sensitive information in which American lives hang in the balance, and moved the safe to her basement and gave everybody access to it. If I did that, if you wanted to speak to me, you'd have to visit me in Leavenworth or some other such facility.
Exactly right.
And so why does nobody get it? How hard is it for people to understand what we're talking about?
Well, you know,
what we're talking
I believe that we're talking about stuff that is actually on a spiritual level so evil and so deceptive and so conceited that
at the top,
they believe,
but here's the problem.
They believe that they're untouchable, and sadly, so far they have been.
Well, because they were able to build the system around their own demands, just like we did with immigration. But here's the point. What in the world are Americans thinking? You know, H.L. Mencken said no one ever went broke underestimating the intelligence of the average American. Americans need to look at the situation dispassionately. I went to a Thanksgiving dinner, got into an argument with one of the folks there. And
Michael,
the guy was rabid.
We got about 30,
go take a break.
30 seconds.
We
got 30 seconds. But, P.T. Barnum also said there's a sucker born every minute.
Every minute. And look, people bought the pet rock and then went out and spent more money on the training manual. Imagine trying to teach a pet rock to play dead.
Exactly. Michael Cutler, our guest. We'll come back with more after the top of the hour. Hard time break. And then much, much more to come in hour number 2 today with Michael Cutler. And we will tell you where to find his articles. And I strongly encourage you to read his stuff. Very, very good. Stick around, folks. Hour number 2 of the J.J. McCartney Show coming up next.
I keep hearing from people.
I want to tell you my secret now. I see dead people.
Like dead serious, they look at me and they say, is he okay?
He's not. People on the inside say he keeps getting worse, mentally keeps getting worse. This is a man in decline.
The lack of intellectual ability is stunning.
Keeps getting worse. This is a man in decline.
The unwritten rule in the psychiatric community that nobody diagnoses from afar.
Keeps getting worse. This is a man in decline.
I just don't think he's a well guy, period.
The behavior pattern that he is demonstrating right now
keeps getting worse. This is a man in decline.
I kind of just want to dispense with political correctness for a bit and just say what everyone is thinking.
The unwritten rule in the psychiatric community that nobody diagnoses from afar.
This behavior is crazy.
Keeps getting worse. This is a man in decline.
The unwritten rule in the psychiatric community that nobody diagnoses from afar.
It's so unbalanced. He is not well.
The unwritten rule in the psychiatric community. Unwritten rule in the psychiatric community that nobody diagnoses from afar.
He's just not well.
Unwritten rule in the psychiatric community that nobody diagnoses from afar.
He has literally devolved to the point where there is concern about his health.
Keeps getting worse. This is a man in decline.
His ability to take in information and use it correctly. It's like a child.
Are you concerned about the president's health? The unwritten rule in the psychiatric community that nobody diagnoses from afar.
I think his family should be concerned about his health.
Keeps getting worse. This is a man in decline.
And I don't know how...
The unwritten rule in the psychiatric community...
How we withstand an unhinged presidency.
That nobody diagnoses from afar.
I'm seriously worried about a person who would do this on a number of levels.
The unwritten rule in the psychiatric community that nobody diagnoses from afar.
Because he's not well and he's not attached to reality.
He's got his fingers on the button and he's tweeting about Hillary. It's time for Article 25.
Amendment 20. This is 25th Amendment.
Go! 25th Amendment. Let's do it. This looks like
the unwritten rule in the psychiatric community that nobody diagnoses from afar.
The steps leading up to a total meltdown.
The unwritten rule in the psychiatric community that nobody diagnoses from afar.
Because this is not funny. This is really bad. Just for the record, we're all really nervous.
I have been sucking my thumb for 27 years. I only suck my thumb when I'm like tired or hungry or mad or sad.
What a dirty, filthy mouth you got. The unwritten rule in the psychiatric community that nobody diagnoses from afar.
Keeps getting worse. This is a man in decline.
I keep hearing from people.
I see dead people.
Like dead serious, they look at me and they say, is he okay? You have no idea what your words mean. And I can't pretend, sort of try and cover this fairly, put it in the veil of objectivity. You have no idea what your words mean and what you're doing to this country. He's trying to undermine the media, trying to make up his own facts. And it could be that he could have undermined the messaging so much that he can actually control exactly what people think. And that is our job.
Who gets attacked and doesn't push back. There have been an outrageous number of personal attacks, not just to him, but to, frankly, everyone around him. This is a president who fights fire with fire, certainly will not be allowed to be bullied by liberal media and the liberal elites within the media or Hollywood or anywhere else. What's necessary is to push back against attacks on the president. I've seen far worse things come out of that show. Again, directed not just at the president, but everyone around him. Personal attacks, mean, hateful attacks. And again, this president isn't going to sit back and not push back, and he's going to fight fire with fire. And the president, again, isn't going to be somebody who's bullied and allows people himself and those around him to be personally attacked. Outrageous attacks that take place on that show day in, day out, not just at the president and not against against his policies, not against things that he's pushing, but they're personal, and they're not just directed at him, but again, everyone around him.
I think the heartland elected Donald Trump. I think there's a common sense out here that people don't get when they're in the city. They have blinders on. If we wreck Middle America, if we wreck agriculture, it will filter through the whole economy, and eventually the coasts will feel it. When I was a kid, we had 4 implement dealers, 3 or 4 car dealers. Don't got nothing like that.
Gary Steele works the same hay farm where he was born. He says the market for hay has dried up. Same for corn. Steele's putting his hope in Trump.
So far, so good. He's pissed everybody off. That's a good sign.
The following is a Nightside Radio Studios production.
From the wind-powered Nightside Radio Studios,
tear down this wall.
This is the J.J. McCartney Show.
It's this man. It's the compassion. It's the dignity. It's the wisdom. It's the horse sense of the guy.
Did you know that 65% of the people murdered in the last 10 years were killed by handguns?
Would it make you feel any better, little girl, if they was pushed out of windows?
The American people have seen the truth, and they can see through your lies. There's coming a day when publications such as yours turn into nothing more than flea market advertising. They'll be handing it out for free in grocery store parking lots under everybody's windshield wiper. Yeah, that's the future for the Washington Post and the New York Times and every other liberal publication in this country. We are not going to tolerate your bull anymore. None of it. The American people are fed up. I thought we made that clear on November 8th, but apparently you people in the media just don't get it. A new chapter in American history begins now.
It is my high honor and distinct privilege to introduce to you the President-elect of the United States of America.
Donald Trump is the person to make America great again.
We are a team.
They said it couldn't be done.
Together, we will lead our party back to the White House.
He said it must be done.
Beginning on January 20th, we cannot afford to be so politically correct anymore. The most important difference between our plan and that of our opponent is that our plan will put America first.
Here's J.J. McCartney.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It's hour number 2 of the J.J. McCartney Show. We've got Michael Cutler on the line with us, and we are talking, well, about many things. We've talked about illegal immigration. We've talked about legal immigration. We have talked about economically how America, time after time, cuts off its nose to spite its face, how materially America has been damaged by our own, if not naivete, then at the very least, a wanton disregard for the best interest of America. You know, Donald Trump talked about putting America first. And there are people in America today, Michael Cutler, who think that talking about America first is somehow a racist and bigoted viewpoint.
Well, Americans have fallen victim to the propaganda. You know, they refer to Trump as an insurgent. I beg to differ. When insurgents take control of a government, the first thing that they seek to do is to gain control over the methods of communication. After they seize the airport to make sure that troops don't come in behind them, they go after the broadcast stations, radio, television, and then the newspapers. And if you look at what is happening in academia, and by the way, it was an interesting documentary I was just watching about espionage in England, about how the Russians infiltrated the elite universities in England to cultivate spies. And if you look at what our universities have turned into with safe spaces, so arbiters that nobody elected are going to be the censors to determine what constitutes hate speech. If you dare say alien, it's hate speech, yet the DREAM Act, the A in DREAM Act, is alien. And by the way, and this is why I hope everyone goes to the Social Contract to read my article about tyranny and censorship. One of the points made is that AP, Associated Press, has a style book. Now, my work in communications, arts, and sciences, we used a style book because, for those of you who went to college, probably remember, you had to be consistent with punctuation and footnoting. And that's what style books generally dealt with. Well, today, style books also deal with language. And if you go to the Associated Press website, they talk about how you can buy a subscription to the AP style book that they describe as the Bible for journalists, for lawyers, for corporate executives, for school teachers. They say this very important reference is found now in newsrooms, courtrooms, classrooms, and boardrooms around the United States. Basically, this is the ministry of truth. And if you use language that is inappropriate, it will automatically edit the words. Think about that. So if you write illegal alien, God only knows what it will change when you write the article. So if you write a letter to, let's say, the New York Times because you want to have an alternative viewpoint published, even if in that rare situation they publish it, language that you may have used would likely be altered by the AP program that runs in their databases. So understand how dangerous this is. You know, I am no fan of the crazy right. My family was decimated by the Nazis. But sometimes I think when people are truly crazy and evil, the best thing you can do is out them by letting their words get out there. And people can read their garbage and say, these people are nuts. They need to be thrown in a rubber room. When you stop people with differing viewpoints from being heard, ultimately, you wind up with only one source of information, which is very, very dangerous. You know, debate, and I never lost a debate in high school or college, and I've done expert testimony. I've offered expert testimony in courtrooms. Debate is really intellectual capitalism. Everyone brings to the marketplace their ideas, and the audience buys or does not buy what they're selling. Now, if you shut down debate, as they have on college campuses with safe spaces, then it's like the Model T Ford. You can get it in any color as long as it's black. Again, this is about making certain that no one even knows that there is an alternative. That's why the internet was problematic for North Korea, why the internet was even problematic for China, because they don't want people to know how anyone else lives or thinks. I remember when I was an inspector at Kennedy Airport, the Soviet Union would fly in a couple nights a week over at the Pan Am facility with the Aeroflot airliners. In fact, I don't know if you remember, but Alexander Goodenough, the ballet dancer, defected, and I was assigned to protect him. His wife was stuck on the airplane. There was a whole international incident, and I wound up protecting Goodenough. But we were adversaries with Russia even more than we are today. And today, you don't get the warm fuzzies from Putin, by the way. Once KGB, always KGB. But one of my buddies struck up a conversation with an Aeroflot stewardess. And this young lady was gorgeous. Most of them were not. Most of them looked like they could have pulled the airplane themselves, okay? But this one girl was stunning. And so he said to her, can we go and have dinner? And she said, I have to get permission, which is, you know, to us made no sense. So she had to go to the political officer who flies on the airline in the cockpit with the crew. They actually had political officers on board Aeroflot.
Wow.
And so she went to this guy and said, what do I do? And he thought about it and scratched his head. And finally he said, okay. And so she came back and said to the guy, yes, I can go with you, but we can't be alone, so you have to get dates for the other 12 girls on the airplane, or whatever that number was.
Of course, we all know.
Needless to say, there were no takers.
We all know what Bill Clinton would have done in that situation.
God knows,
yeah.
But aim low in his case. But so in any event, but the point of the matter was they didn't want the crew to be out there in public. They were put in vans and hustled to some crappy hotel in Midtown Manhattan when we had some of the best hotels in the world. They were not allowed to see how people live in a free market capitalist society, because once you get them off the farm, you're never going to get them back on the farm.
That's
and
right.
So this is what is now happening in universities today. And in fact, if you look at what Orwell had to say about all of this, suddenly it really and truly makes so much sense. First of all, according to George Orwell, who do you think posed the greatest threat to the ruling elite in Oceania, this fictitious country in 1984, who do you think would be the most dangerous to the elite?
Well,
the answer is the middle class.
Yeah,
because the middle class had the education and the intellect, but they lacked money, resources, so they were the ones most likely to understand that they were being shortchanged and rised up. So there was the middle class that was subjected to the most extensive and invasive surveillance because they feared the middle class, okay? And if you actually look at what Orwell talked about, getting rid of the use of language, controlling words, and every time you could, you eliminated words from the vernacular or made certain that words only had one meaning, and they used the word free, for example. You couldn't talk about being free in the conventional sense. You could say a dog was free from lice or a field was free from weeds, but the idea of being politically free or socially free didn't even exist because the word free only had that one meaning, and they made sure it only had one meaning, and they did it by burning books periodically. Now, of course, with a keystroke, you can eliminate language right off a computer. You can rewrite history. And so when there are people on college campuses, including teachers, who shut down debate, then you understand what this is really about. It's about making certain that everyone sings the company jingle. And if you want to look at where the Democrats are and why I have a real problem with the Democrat Party, see, here's the point, and I think I may have said this previously on your program. Back in the 50s and early 60s, there was balance. The Republicans, for the most part, looked out for business owners, which is fine because business owners have legitimate concerns and desires and so forth. And the Democrats looked out for working people, and very often there is that dynamic tension between worker and management, labor management. That's a traditional dividing line. So the Democrats supported the workers, the Republicans, the business owners, and there was balance on the scales. When the Democrats turned its back on its traditional base, hardworking, blue-collar, union member American workers, that's when the wheels came off the wagon. Because suddenly, all the power went against the average American family, the average American worker. And Alan Greenspan, on 2009, April 30th, testified for Chuck Schumer, the architect of the agriculture provision of the amnesty of '86. By the way, Mahmoud Abu Alima, one of the key players in the '93 bombing at the World Trade Center, got amnesty as an agricultural worker purportedly for picking beans in Florida, when in reality the closest he ever came to a farm was when he drove his taxi cab near Central Park in New York City. He committed fraud. And then that bombing killed 6 people, injured over 1,000 people, inflicted more than $500 million in damages, and almost brought the towers down sideways. And the Clinton administration ignored the lessons we should have learned from that and the shooting at the CIA a month earlier by a Pakistani who had claimed political asylum. In fact, I did my very first congressional hearing as an expert witness May 20th, 1997, about immigration fraud and visa fraud because of those 2 terror attacks. So Schumer was the architect. When I met with him, he used to be my congressman, apparently never my representative. Back in '85, I said, why are you pushing a program for amnesty for agricultural workers? You don't even have a farm in your district. As soon as I said that, he looked at his watch, got very angry. He said, Mr. Cutler, your time is up. My next appointment's here. You need to leave. I said, I've only been here about 8 minutes. He said, I don't care how long you've been here. Out. And he's only gotten more arrogant.
Wow.
So he has Alan Greenspan testify for him. And Greenspan talks about how illegal aliens are resented by Americans. Americans have a problem with it, but they are a flexible labor force, and they only minimally suppress wages. Well, understand something, folks. If you minimally suppress wages of people at the bottom rung of the economic ladder, that is enough to push them from having a place to live and becoming homeless. And if you look at where we are today, homelessness is at a record level. Okay, yeah. This isn't an accident. This didn't happen by some circumstance that we have no way of understanding. This happened because we have flooded America with more authorized workers than the number of new jobs we create.
And
but then he went after the middle class.
There was a headline even today that in Los Angeles, record numbers of homeless people. And, you know, if Los Angeles is not the canary in the coal mine, who is?
No, it is. But look, you have Jerry Brown, Governor Moonbeams, who has turned it into a sanctuary state that he's now commuting sentences and giving pardons to aliens convicted of crimes so that immigration can't deport them. This is obstruction of governmental administration.
Yes, it is.
But that's what they are about. So they are reaping what they have sowed, okay? but they're delusional because Jerry Brown on a 60 Minutes program talked about how wonderful his economy is doing. His state is bankrupt. He's in the stratosphere. His brain is suffering hypoxia, okay? But then you have Alan Greenspan testify for Chuck Schumer, and he talks about why we need many more H-1B visas the way Bill Gates wants. And he says this. There's two reasons why, two compelling reasons. I'm now quoting Alan Greenspan. The first paragraph will anger you. The second paragraph, if you take high blood pressure pills, take them now, avoid the rush later. First, this is Greenspan. First, skilled workers and their families form new households. They will, of necessity, move into vacant housing units, the current glut of which is depressing prices of American homes. To interrupt Greenspan, vacant housing units. Don't you see the Norman Rockwell painting of the American home lost to foreclosure?
Yep.
Vacant housing unit. No, it's an American home that an American family used to live in, but were thrown out because the economy crashed, okay? And then he goes on and says this. And of course, house price declines are a major factor in mortgage foreclosures and the plunge in value of the vast quantity of U.S. mortgage-backed securities that has contributed substantially to the disabling of our banking system. Talk about a run-on sentence.
No kidding.
What caused the crashing were his subprime mortgages for illegal aliens who had multiple identities, so you could never figure out who the hell you were giving money to. And something no one talks about, but I talk about. Think of all those pre-approved credit cards for illegal aliens under multiple identities. At least when you foreclose a mortgage, you own the land and you own the building and you own the appliances in the building. When a guy or a gal defaults on a credit card, you're holding dust. Okay?
That's right.
And so think of all the money that went poof over the subprime. And I wrote an article where I included Greenspan's statement just a couple of years earlier when he addressed the Fed as the chairman, talking about the wonders of subprime mortgages, giving people loans who otherwise couldn't qualify. Baloney. They couldn't qualify. They still couldn't qualify, and they thought that if they spread the risk around thinly enough, that it wouldn't disrupt the system. It wrecked the system. This was Greenspan's gift to America. But it gets worse. Now, this is the one that will give you blood pressure problems. The second bonus in flooding America with H-1B visas, that's what we're talking about. So let me quote him. The second bonus would address the increasing concentration of income in this country. What does that mean, by the way, folks? Someone's getting wealthy.
The rich get richer. The rich get richer.
Well, that's not what he's talking about, you would think. So let me finish this. He says that the increasing concentration of income in this country, greatly expanding our quotas for the highly skilled would lower wage premiums of the skilled over the lesser skilled. Skill shortages in America exist because we are shielding our skilled labor force from world competition. Quotas have been substituted for the wage pricing mechanism, and in the process, we have created, and you're going to love this term, JJ, a privileged elite. We're talking about the middle class here, folks. He calls the middle class the privileged elite whose incomes are being supported at non-competitively high levels by immigration quotas on skilled professionals. Eliminating such restrictions would reduce at least some of our income inequality. Now, look how this has been sold to the American people.
Wow.
How many times have you heard from Hillary and Bernie and all the others, 10 an hour for income equality? Now, I happen to agree with increasing minimum wage, and I know my conservative friends disagree. And as Americans, we should disagree. That's how you celebrate democracy and the First Amendment, okay?
Yep.
It doesn't mean you're the enemy if you disagree with me. It makes you an American with a different perspective. And sometimes sitting down with people you disagree with helps you to see things differently, or helps them, or maybe helps both sides to see things differently. By the way, that's another problem. People tend to either watch Fox News or CNN or MSNBC. I have a friend, I was on Fox News the other day, and he said, well, how could you expect me to watch it? I never watch Fox. I said, well, I gave you the link. I don't care if it's Fox. I won't watch it.
Yeah.
Brilliant guy.
Yeah.
Brilliant guy. And so I didn't even bother answering him. But the point is, you need to see what the other side says. I routinely turn the station to watch a snippet of the show or that. Why? You know, and by the way, in the old days, right after 9/11, I was on MSNBC as frequently as CNN, as frequently as Fox. They have turned off the debate because they don't want the truth out there.
That's right.
Okay?
That's right.
But here's the point on minimum wage. what they're talking about is we're going to attain minimum wage by raising we're going to attain income equality by raising minimum wage. That doesn't make sense. And even if you go to 15 an hour, I actually agree with 15 an hour if we're dealing with bigger companies and people say, well, you're going to pay people money to flip hamburgers for minimum wage, they'll just hire fewer people. Companies don't hire extra people to begin with. That's a bogus argument. Let's be fair about this. Companies, unlike government, don't get an amount of money and they say, oh, we're going to spend all the money. No, they're very careful not to hire more people than they actually need. So will they automate faster? Perhaps they will, but that's what's coming anyway. So why do we keep importing more foreign workers? Because in the next decade, between growth in artificial intelligence and mechanization through industrial robots, the need for worker drones is falling through the floorboard. That includes agricultural workers. If I hear anyone talk about picking fruit, it's being done by machinery as it is. If you look at programs, how it's made on the Science Channel, I don't have much interest in most movies. Watching adults pretend they're people they could never be, even if they grew up, doesn't do it for me. I'd rather watch documentaries or science programs. I was going to be an engineer way back when. One of my kids one's finishing engineering school. I'm a science guy. I love to watch how it's made. If you look at the way cars are made, it seems as though 90% of the work is now being done with robots. Give it another few years, they'll be up to 95%.
That's right. And they use certain phrases in that show that really tell you where the unskilled labor is coming from. They don't say, a technician or an engineer. They say a worker does this or a worker
the assembler,
does that.
The assembler.
Exactly. Right. So it's becoming depersonalized because ultimately we know that, you have to pay people more than you pay automation.
Not only pay people more, and you have better quality control over a robot.
That's right.
My dad only bought one new car as a construction worker. When he worked on the World's Fair, he made overtime, and he was all excited. He bought his first and only new car. And people said, don't get cars that are made on Fridays or Mondays. Friday, everyone's going out to drink, and Monday, everyone's coming back with a hangover.
That's right.
So
that's right.
Aim for Wednesday. Well, machines don't get hangovers, and they don't use the bathroom, and they can work 24/7, and the union's not going to complain about it. Yeah. So understand that it makes sense, and everything is uniform. If you look at machinery that's made by robots, there's almost no variation. The tolerances are incredibly infinitesimal.
That's right. Spot welding, something so critical to automobiles, and the machines do it consistently well. So it makes sense to do that. But when you mentioned that about Fridays and Mondays, it made me think of a line in one of the space movies. I don't know whether it was, The Right Stuff or something like that. But after everything is done and the astronauts are getting ready to take off, one of them looks around and says, we're about to make this incredible journey because all of these contractors came together and they got their materials from the lowest bidder.
Yeah, how does it feel to be sitting on a rocket filled with hundreds of thousands of explosive rocket fuel built by the lowest bidder?
Exactly right.
So,
but but the thing is, you get what you pay for in many respects, and that's always been an American staple in industry. What we see now is, especially with the internationalism of all these corporations that have moved in and swooped down and taken control of the news media. They've taken control of many in many different aspects. And what they try to do is they try to limit the information that you're getting.
Well, it's propaganda. Again, it's the Ministry of Truth. But here's the point that I was getting at, JJ. So we're being told that wage equality depends on destroying the middle class. So the elevator isn't going up, it's coming down. Now, the other issue is 15 an hour is not the kind of wage that most people aspire to.
No.
Okay? Even 15. And in New York, I can tell you can't live on it. You can't support a dog on $15 an hour in New York City. I promise you. If you want to rent an apartment in New York, unless you're willing to live in a closet somewhere in the worst neighborhood imaginable, you're going to spend $1,500 to $2,000 a month for any kind of reasonable apartment. Now,
and I can't.
How do you do that at 15 an hour?
I can't. Well, even going back to my days in Alaska, I had to get by in the early 1980s. I was a young, struggling disc jockey. I was making $4 an hour in Anchorage, Alaska, where apartments there I mean, today you can't find an apartment in Anchorage.
But this is the point. Before we lose sight of the point,
sure.
They're talking not about minimum wage. Then they're now talking about, without saying it, standard wage.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Because they're using the word wage equality. See,
right.
If they were honest, they would say we want to help the poor live better lives. I would agree with them, and I'm with them on that.
You can have wage equality when you have skill equality.
Right, I agree with you there too. But my point is the use of language is telling.
Yes,
Listen to the words carefully.
That's
They're not using them indiscriminately. When you talk wage equality, 15 an hour, what they're saying is everyone will be equal when everyone is earning 15 an hour.
You know, that's really, honestly, what their mistakes are so plentiful. You can find them anywhere. One of the things about, wage equality, $15 an hour, what good is that going to do to the person that has a $200 a day drug habit? Or somebody that so let's go to another
point.
The language, for example.
So let's go to another point. So you want to talk about the drug habit? Why is it that in New York, I don't know how it is where you are, they do have commercials finally, usually run by the state, how if you have an opioid addiction, we can help you, okay?
Right.
Nothing to be ashamed of, we'll help you, which is fine. But I have yet to see a single commercial, as they do with cigarettes, saying, don't use opiates.
Right.
Right. If you've had surgery, if you're in pain, work with your physician to take drugs that are not addictive.
Have you seen the commercials they're running now for Philip Morris admitting what they did in making cigarettes more addictive, adding ingredients that made cigarettes more addictive and that delivered more nicotine to the bloodstream?
No, I didn't see it, but that goes back to that program about 60 Minutes, not wanting to add the show about the insider, where basically cigarettes were nicotine-delivering mechanisms.
Yes. Well, this is a mea culpa by the tobacco industry that was ordered as part of a settlement. And, obviously the government holding a gun to their heads and saying, admit to what you did. And they've done that. And I believe the reason they've done that is because they've been assured that there will be no class action lawsuits to follow. But
understand the point. Yeah. Why aren't we seeing a similar effort about the opiates? Did you see the latest 60 Minutes, the follow-up about opiates and these corporations that have been selling the opiates?
Yes, it is an outrage.
So, and I spoke to the producer. They did a really good job. And again, remember, I wasn't just an INS agent. I spent half my career with the Drug Task Force and DEA intelligence. Right. So I was looking at both problems. But yet you never see anything saying to the public, hey, stay away from the opiates. They're terribly addictive. Why don't they put people on the way they do with the cigarettes, showing somebody with a stoma, the hole in their throat, trying to take a shower and saying, don't let this happen to you. Why is there no one saying, I'm a crack addict, look at me, or I'm addicted to heroin. This is what my life is like. This is where I used to work. I know of a woman who had her MBA and she was the vice president of a bank or the president of a bank who became a prostitute because she got hooked on crack and her life spiraled out of control. Why aren't those people on TV warning people, hey, you might think that your world is going along smoothly. So did I until I tried crack at some party, and I've never been the same. Lost her children to her husband, and her husband got a divorce, and this woman is done. She's a train wreck. Why isn't that on TV?
Well, the sad reality is that the drug trade in America has essentially been subsidized by parts of the intelligence community. And for a long time, we know that black ops or, off-the-books operations have been funded creatively by people within and without in the federal government.
There's a bigger issue. There's a bigger issue, though, if I can. And the bigger issue is that if you took the drug money out of banking, real estate, and Wall Street, they'd go belly up.
Wow.
Hundreds of billions of dollars wash through there.
But aren't we going to reach a point, though, where we do need to reap what we've sown as a nation?
Well, we are. Last year, 65,000 people died of opiate overdoses. Now, imagine I don't know if you ever saw that movie, Black Sunday, where the terrorists take a blimp over a football. Okay. Well, imagine that stadium blowing up. That's what happened last year in terms of heroin deaths and opiate deaths in America.
It makes 9/11 pale in comparison.
Nothing.
It really does.
And where does the money go? It's funding criminal and terrorist organizations. How many more people have died because somebody who was bombed out of his mind got behind the wheel of a car and killed a bunch of people?
Yeah, and
how many people have
law
been
enforcement
killed because of it?
Yeah.
How many people have been killed because a drug addict committed an armed robbery to get money for his habit and killed people?
Right.
How many people have died because competing gangs, if you look at MS-13, and I investigated those gangs, extremely violent. And if you say, well, let's enforce the immigration law, oh, that's anti-immigrant. Really? Well, on Long Island, I began investigating MS-13 25 years ago. It was a pimple on the backside of an elephant. It was a nothing. When Obama let the unaccompanied minors in by the boatload, what we wound up with is a massive influx of MS-13 that now infests 40 states. 2 years, within the last 2 years, it's believed at least, I believe it's 40 children on Long Island, all Latinos, all members of the ethnic immigrant community, killed, some of them in their early teens. They have recruited gang members as young as 8 years of age in the public schools, okay? So
that's not to mention the problems with Muslim immigrants. I mean, we're talking about Latinas.
Look, please understand. We've got to. Let me make a point, JJ. The point is this. This isn't about Latinos and it's not about Muslims. And when I hear both sides, I want to have an explosion in my brain.
Sure.
It's about people from other countries who come to America for other than the right reasons. And what do I mean by other than the right reasons? They're either criminals or they're terrorists or they're fugitives from justice.
Right.
I arrested more illegal Israelis than anybody in the history of the New York field office, because my very first case, which was supposed to be a nothing case, caused me to trip over a terror plot in Israel. We prevented the bombing of an oil refinery. I don't know how many lives we saved. From that day on, I had the most amazing relationship with the Israeli National Police. I'm told I was the only American law enforcement official who was not only allowed to walk through their consulate in New York City without an escort, but with my firearm. On 9/11, one of their retired police generals had been assigned to New York, called me up to make certain my family was okay. If we did cases on Israelis, they would actually provide us with free transportation to send their citizen home to face justice. I arrested a guy wanted for murder in Israel. And so I arrested more illegal Israelis who had come here because they were fugitives or they were criminals. Believe me, I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm Jewish. I was a B'nai B'rith president back in college. Yet the Anti-Defamation League, an arm of the B'nai B'rith, has referred to me in articles as being anti-immigrant, which is the myth and the lie and the bullying tactic.
Yes.
I am pro-enforcement. And so here's something. Jerry Brown said, the governor of California, we spoke about him earlier, we need to protect the immigrants. No, you don't. You don't need to protect lawful immigrants from immigration because we admitted them. Right. We gave them their green cards. We allow them to become citizens. That's absurd. You know, it's like when George W. Bush used to say, we're going to legalize the immigrants. And I used to go on stage and I would say, offering to legalize immigrants is like offering to make water wet. Whenever I did a speaking engagement, I always had a glass of water with me at the podium, and I'd hold up the glass of water and say to the audience, offering to make immigrants legal is like me offering to make water wet. Water is wet. Immigrants are legal. It's all part of this fake narrative that's been created all over the place. Immigration has less than nothing to do with Latinos. Yes, the majority of illegals who enter without inspection come across the Mexican border, but nearly half of all illegal aliens enter through ports of entry. And they are from Europe, they are from Asia, they are from the Caribbean, they are from the Dominican Republic, they are from Africa, they are from Canada. And I've arrested people from every country on the planet, and I didn't say, let me go out there and find some Latino to lock up today. We were out investigating foreign nationals from just about every country on the planet. I got an award from the government of Japan for helping them with a case. So when I hear people talk about Latinos and Mexicans, I want to explode. And by the way, this notion of Latino voters is as stupid and biased and examples of racism that I've ever heard in my life. If you think that an American whose last name is Ramirez or Rodriguez or Sanchez wants something different from an American whose last name is Smith, Jackson, or Goldstein, you're nuts. They are American, and they're no less American than any other American.
That's right.
And the notion of dividing Americans up by race, religion, or ethnicity is anti-American And it's racism. By the way,
it's stereotyping.
It is, but on a worse level.
It's so intellectually lame to stereotype.
But it's worse than lame, because here's what it's doing, JJ. I'm sorry to keep interrupting you, but here's what it does. When I was a kid, if my parents introduced me to someone in the neighborhood, hey, Mike, this person just immigrated from England. Wow, that's great. They want to be Americans. Today, because we don't distinguish legal immigrant from illegal alien, when you hear the word immigrant, you presume the person came here in violation of our laws. That is a tremendous disservice to the million lawful immigrants we admit every year. So that now people don't even understand that there's a legal process. Because people like Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and all these others, oh, there's no way for these people to come here. We admit 1 million lawful immigrants. They're given green cards. They're on the path to citizenship. We admit tens of millions of non-immigrants, temporary visitors, as tourists, as students, as foreign workers, as journalists, as diplomats. They flow freely into our country every single day. Again, for 4 years, I was at the airport watching this and participating in the process. So this is not about the need to protect immigrants from evil immigration agents. It's about protecting Americans and members of ethnic immigrant communities from the criminals and terrorists who seek to come to America for the wrong reasons and embed themselves so they can carry out more crime, more violence, and do more damage. And so understand what the language has done. If you're a pollster and you want to divide people up where it makes sense, that's reasonable. But not based on race, religion, or ethnicity. That's racism. Why don't you do it by age? A guy my age, I'm retired, I have different concerns than my kids who are starting out in life. Why don't you do it by socioeconomics? The guy who has a high school education and is looking for work is more likely to lose his job to an illegal alien than the American student who has a degree in engineering or programming who's fearful of losing his job to someone from India, let's say, with an H-1B visa. Right. You see? So if you want to look at the way we can split up demographics, sure, people on farms live different lives from people in the city. That's reasonable. So you could look at age, you could look at education, you could look at socioeconomics, you could look at geography. But when you start to talk about Latinos, you are a racist, a bigot, and a damn fool. And, what do you think of that, Jake?
Well, this too, it deals with the fact that, people within and outside of the government, they simply refuse to acknowledge individuality. It's not a one-size-fits-all system, and everybody has a different skill set. Everybody has a different work ethic. Everybody has a different personal history, and a
different dream, and different goals.
Exactly right.
But here's my point for everyone to think about. Individuals write history. There was a very interesting article I showed it to my youngest son. He's an engineering student. How we got here. And it's how we got here, and it was all about clean water and how some guy, I wish I had his name in front of me, came up with the idea in Chicago of building sewers under the buildings. And so guess how he did it? He jacked up the buildings. Now, who would have imagined that? He took the jack stands that were used in railways and jacked up buildings, hotels, while people were still going about their business in the buildings. They jacked them up and built infrastructure under the buildings. One man's idea.
Wow.
Within years, everyone started to emulate this one guy's idea. You see?
And that led to a broader thought process of building the infrastructure underground as a means of, look at Manhattan. What you see above the ground is cosmetically wonderful. But without the infrastructure beneath, and imagine the genius that comes up with this idea.
No, but there's a reason I'm saying this. Everyone feels so unempowered.
That's right.
Because, I'm only one person. My point to you is that history is written by individuals. And please understand that.
And it's made.
It was Jules Verne's book, From the Earth to the Moon, that inspired von Braun and Oppenheimer and the early rocket scientists to build rockets.
Right.
Okay? One person. If you look at what Albert Einstein achieved, one person. how much of a difference did these people make? Had they never been born, we wouldn't know what we're missing. But the world would be a very different place today.
Consider what it would look like today if Nikola Tesla had never come to America.
Well, that's right. So, but the reason I'm mentioning this, so here is the responsibility we all have. If you are being bullied by some loudmouth, I'm not asking anyone to get into anything physical, far from it. But if you look at the First Amendment, the right for peaceable assemblage, the trick is that we need to stand our ground. When someone says something truly off the rails, stand up to the person. Not physically. Don't turn it into, a peeing contest, because in a peeing contest, the best you can hope for is to not get wet.
Yeah.
But you need to arm yourself with the facts. Please go to my websites, by the way. I hope you find where I write. My stuff is helpful. And I do an internet radio program, on Friday nights and on Blog Talk Radio, the Michael Cutler Hour. But please go to michaelcutler.net, one word, C-U-T-L-E-R, michaelcutler.net. I write for the Social Contract. I've done some work for CAPS Web, Californians for Population Stabilization, capsweb.org. And I also write, a lot of my stuff is for frontpagemag.com, Front Page Magazine, sponsored by the David Horowitz Freedom Center. But, there's no substitution for having ammunition. Facts in a debate are the ammunition. I hear too many people say, I've heard, and they say, and that's a waste of everybody's time. Because a lot of what you're quoting is worthless. I want to give you an example of this because it came to my attention just before the show started today. There's a book that's been written by a real piece of work by the name of Luke Harding. And that book essentially the title of the book is Collusion. Okay? And his whole premise of the book and everything about the book is based on the Steele dossier. And so this really good guy at therealnews.com by the name of Aaron Mate interviews Luke Harding. And Michael, you'll be amazed. He just keeps pressing him. Well, what are you basing this on? Where are your facts? What do you and over and over again, you hear this moron say, well, you just come to Russia and talk to anybody that's involved with human rights and blah, blah, blah. Anybody. Yeah. That's the Obama line. Everyone agrees with me. Who's everybody? Exactly. But so here's another premise I have. I wrote an article and I called it The Art of the Question. Trump had his art of the deal. For me, it's the art of the question. The most valuable return we got from the space program, most people don't realize what the most valuable return is. It's the next set of questions. Exactly right. You don't know what you don't know. In fact, Voltaire, and JFK frequently quoted Voltaire. Voltaire used to say, you judge a man's intelligence by his questions. You mentioned Voltaire. Most people don't ask questions. So let me give you an example of how people get hurt badly. And I'm sure you've received these emails. We've all gotten them. Congratulations, you've just won $25 million in a lottery. Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay? And then they tell you, please supply the following information: your name, your date of birth, your address, your email address, and the bank where you want the money sent. And by the way, here's our address. Please submit to us a check for $25,000 to cover the cost of taxes and processing fees, and we will send you your $25 million check. Now, if you have a half a brain, you're going to look at this. You're going to probably just send it off to trash. But if you don't, the first logical question, now maybe this is just me. How do you win a lottery when you didn't buy the ticket? That's right. All right, that's question one. Now, it all begins with what? With asking questions. Yeah. How could I have won the lottery ticket if I didn't buy a ticket? The answer is you can't. So there, it's bogus. But maybe you're hard of thinking. You mentioned Voltaire. And I, one of the greatest minds in history. Okay, I'm going to counter that with Johnny Hart. Do you know who Johnny Hart is? No, go ahead. Johnny Hart is the cartoonist that came up with The Wizard of Id and BC, the comics. All right. One particular frame in his comic strip
was one of the guys in BC, and I can't remember their names. This is a long, long time ago.
Okay.
But the crux of the entire thing was this phrase: "It's amazing what one can do when one doesn't know what one can do."
Well, that's another story, and I agree. We limit ourselves when we say can't or impossible. I agree. My parents were very big on that. But going back to the point that I'm trying to make is people need to stop and question what they're being told. And we don't do it. People take things at blind faith. Well, it was published, it must be true. He was on television, then it must be accurate, because TV, of course, is magical. I've been on hundreds and hundreds of television programs. I've gone to events where I'm speaking and people are staring at you. And I'm talking people in my age bracket. They're in their 60s. And, gee whiz, did I not zip? I mean, why are they staring at me? And you'd come up and say, oh, we saw you on TV. Like it was magical.
Wow.
But how many times do you see that? Go to the store and they plaster a little label on something as seen on TV, which makes it magical. Folks, people don't get credibility by being on television. People don't get credibility by writing a book. You have got to go beyond the fact that you've seen them on TV or heard them on the radio or saw it on the internet. Ask the questions.
Yes.
So, for example, we can't separate these families. Why not? We can't process, or we can't possibly deal with the millions who are here. Let's just give them all lawful status. Well, wait a moment. Does that make sense? Do we do this with any other areas of law enforcement?
Exactly.
Have you ever heard a police chief or a mayor say, too many people drive and drink, we can't do anything about it? Have you ever heard that?
Let's make every law retroactively invalid.
Right, so then we can have a crime-free country with lots of dead bodies because no one's violating the law no matter what they do. It's called anarchy.
Exactly right.
But you see, no one ever, because people say that to me all the time. They say, Mr. Cutler, what would you do with the aliens you can't catch? And I say to them, what do we do with the drunk drivers we don't catch? And they just sit there looking at you like they just discovered that the Earth rotates.
Yeah, just because you can't succeed 100% of the time doesn't mean you stop
but
trying
why is
100% of the time.
But here's my problem. Why does no one question it? You see, if you would stop and question it, use a little bit of critical thinking and reasoning.
Well, it's because of that word you used earlier. People now are in a mindset where they're afraid of being portrayed as a bad guy. It's a form of bullying. It really is,
and
it's
I've said that repeatedly. And we reinforce this insanity by telling kids, if someone punches you, don't you dare punch back.
Yeah, exactly right.
Run for help. Well, really? Is that how America was built?
Yeah, it's like if you work at 7-Eleven, the instructions from management say, always do what the guy with the gun that's robbing you says. Always cooperate. And at some point in time, I mean, they may as well put another label on the store that says, "Our safe is available for your pleasure at 10 p.m. nightly."
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. You don't want to engage a guy with a gun and get yourself or someone in the store killed.
Understood.
I was in a restaurant. Years ago with my son, and I was dating a young lady at the time who was an FBI agent. And the place got robbed. And some cop criticized me afterwards. He says, "You didn't shoot him?" I said to him, "Schmuck, you're in a crowded restaurant. You never know if the guy sitting at the table next to you is a co-conspirator, an accomplice." I wasn't about to have a gun battle with bullets flying in a restaurant where people are waiting online to be seated because it's packed to the walls.
Exactly.
What I did do was get the license plate of the car he jumped into and took off. But I can tell you of several cases where law enforcement officers were in the middle of a place that got robbed and paid for acting with their lives. In one case, a guy was online with his family, off-duty cop. Guy walks into a fast food burger joint right near Prospect Park in Brooklyn, announces a stick-up. Guy pulls out his gun and says, "I'm a police officer." Guy standing outside the store, ready to take the robber to wherever they were going to go after the robbery, shoots through the plate glass window, manages to catch the cop in the head. He dies in front of his wife and 2 children. There was another case of a guy in a bar. Robbery. He jumps up, shoots the robber. The girl sitting next to him that he did not know pulls the gun out of her pocketbook, shoots him in the head, and runs out of the bar. So I understand that. The bigger issue for me, is that as a country, we need to exercise our First Amendment.
Yeah.
We need to exercise First Amendment. Not getting into a fight with a guy with a gun in the store. I would probably think that's actually a good policy. They teach cops, and if something happens, don't even take action off duty. The best thing you can do is be a good witness, which is what I did in that robbery. You know, imagine if I had pulled my gun out and the guy starts shooting and innocent people are killed. How much money could he have gotten away with? $5,000?
Yeah.
My first wife died of cancer 31 years ago. Believe me, I'd give any amount of money to get her back. And so you don't want to be in that situation. But where there is no risk to your life, but risk to the Constitution and America's future, folks, arm yourself with the facts and please commit yourself to speaking the truth.
Right.
That's all I ask you to make your New Year's resolution about, that we won't be pushed around anymore.
It's great
that
advice.
We will engage in a debate and make it clear that we're not going to back down. When I was a B'nai B'rith president, I participated in a retreat on the weekend. And they said that if you are in a place and someone starts spewing racism, bigotry, anti-Semitism, whatever, unless you verbally confront the person, the presumption will be made that you agree.
Yeah, exactly. Michael, we're going to run out of time here.
To stand up and say you're damn wrong and how dare you use that language.
We are just about plumb out of time here, Michael. I do want to tell everybody, go to The Social Contract, capsweb.com, michaelcutler.net.
MichaelCutler.net and frontpagemag.com. Thanks, Abby. Have a happy new year, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you next year, kiddo.
You got it. Thank you, Michael. Take care. All right, friends, neighbors, countrymen, stay close. We will be back tomorrow, same time, same place. The mysterious Colonel will be our guest tomorrow, and we will talk about so much news that we just barely had a chance to mention today. We'll get to that tomorrow, and I appreciate all of you being with us, especially at Red State Talk Radio. Folks, you won't find any place where the opinions and the hosts are so informed. And none of us are obligated to the big corporations that control the mainstream media. We don't, we don't pretend that we are part of the mainstream. Instead, my friends, what we are is we are the voice of America, the true voice of America that is seldom heard in the mainstream because of the propagandists, because of the way they go about their jobs, which is to suppress free speech, our First Amendment, that Michael was just talking about. Now, friends, every day we come back here, we do the show, and we could use your help. If you want to be a part of this battle for the heart and soul of America, you can help us out. Go to jjmccartney.com. You'll find a donate button. You can help us out there. You can also, spread the word by sharing the program with your friends on social networks. But this is the work that needs to be done. If America is going to be great again, as we've heard the president say so many times, it's going to require every one of us to push in the same direction. It really is. How many people do you know that hold the same passion for the truth that you do and that we do? You know, if we don't invite them, they won't come. Please help us spread the word. I can't emphasize how important that is. And we're not going to get rich doing this, but America can be enriched by her people standing up for their First Amendment right of free speech and to get the information out there in front of as many eyeballs as possible. Make people realize that they have been sold tons of lies over the past, 70 years. I mean, there is so much. You talk about collusion between, corporate media and the body politic. I mean, it is ridiculous. So yes, we will stand for the truth, and I hope you will too. There's only so much time we get on this planet to make our mark, to say what we have to say, to stand on the things we know are right, and to stand against the things we know are wrong. And cannot tell you how vital it is to the cause that all of us put a shoulder into the wheel and push. We can get things done, my friends. Together, we can get things done. Divided? Well, you see what's happened to America during the Obama years. America has never been more divided politically. We need to get to a place where Americans act on behalf of themselves and their fellow Americans. It's Donald Trump's mantra. Put America first. Make America great again. All right, my friends, we'll come back tomorrow, do it all over again with the Colonel. Until then, be good to yourselves, and if you possibly can, be good to someone else. And remember, we'll win in the end because there are more of us than there are of them, because God is with us, and because we're all in this thing together. Have a great rest of your Thursday. We'll see you right back here on Friday. Until then, be safe out there, everybody, and stay warm. Stay warm. It's getting cold outside. See you tomorrow, everybody. God bless. Bye-bye.